So I know we've done this before, but still, like, can you introduce yourself for the coaches and therapists?
Sure, sure. My name is Håkan Andersson. I live in Sundsvall in the northern Sweden. I've been a sprint coach since 1985 around for a national and on an international level. I've been coaching, consulting athletes in a lot of other sports on high level, like swimmers, boxing, speed skating. But also, done some work in soccer and basketball, ice hockey, more so as a personal coach than in a group setting. And I'm currently working as a senior advisor at the High Performance Center in Växjö, in the southern Sweden, where I'm responsible for our testing facility, and we support around 30 professional and semi-professional sports. Mainly in team sports in ice hockey and football, handball, and so on. So that's what I do.
Cool, man. I think it's about like 2 weeks ago, I started to ask like like sprint coaches all around the world to give me their like top five sprint coaches for them right now, and you're in many of those lists.
Oh, thanks a lot. That's very, very flattering, but I don't know. It's not a competition between coaches, and sometimes it's hard to understand those kind of rankings. For me, it's about being as good as you can be, with your circumstances, and the end of the day is about winning medals, and it's hard to compete with some that probably on that list. And I had a chance to spend some time with Stephen Francis and his MVP group at the University of Technology in Jamaica. And, when you talk about success, I think he has guided, almost 90 medals in the Olympics and the World Championships. That's more than many, many great nations in the world. And that's only within one group setting and from one coach. And so what I saw there, was a very dedicated, hardworking man, very science-driven, never seen so much technology anywhere in the world. And I've been in a lot of places. And, Francis, he masters up to, I think his group contains about almost 70 athletes. And of course, he has great assistance by some assistant coaches like Sean Manboard and others. But it's just an incredible environment for sprinting and hurdling and so on.
Cool. So, this is based on what we discussed before. So, how exactly to be a successful coaches like you or like others?
But I think you have to do the best out of your own circumstances. Like where we are, our ground is covered with snow, from the beginning of November till the end of April, So, obviously we don't have we can't run in grass, and, we don't have much sun in the dark periods. But that's what it is. You can't let that drag you down, but you also have to you also have to consider that one training system is not necessarily the best system for everyone. And me as a coach is definitely not the best coach for everyone, and I think, communication is a key feature for coaching. Sometimes we get maybe too technical. We study and read a lot, but it's, end of the day, it's a matter of communication. We're dealing with human beings, and we have to accept that, every athlete is unique, and you have to enjoy guiding young athletes to be better athletes, but perhaps more important, to be great human beings, after the hundreds of coaches athletes I coach, only a few made it to the international level, but I'm very, very happy to see that most of them have very good lives and successful careers, and they look back to their athletic career with joy, not only from winning medals, that from, spending time together And some athletes I coach for a very, very extended time. One guy, Stefan Ternhuvud, he's been a national champion, I think, about 6 times. I think I was his coach for 16 years. So you develop a very strong relationship. It's almost like a father-son relationship, and you got to enjoy spending time with these athletes. It's a very important thing. If you want to succeed, that you have to have necessary time. That if it takes 20 hours a week for an athlete, it takes almost 30 hours for a coach. With not only to attend the practice, but you have to plan the training, you got to evaluate and so on. So you must have a lot of time available. So it's we have to understand that like I said, everyone is unique, and we have to start there, I think.
Love this. I love this. I think people who are listening to this, they will be learning a lot.
And you also need access to talent. You have to, sprinting is a very genetic sport. So, it's a matter of finding the right parents, and then like a coach that doesn't ruin you with too much hard work, and you have to access to facilities is really important. Climate can make a big change, but money can certainly, to a point, perhaps equalize a latter. If you can afford to go to warm where the training camps, that is usually a situation for Scandinavian athletes that try to spend as much time as they can afford on the warmer latitude in the winter months. And it's very important that you make sure as a coach that the athletes has a good social situation, so that they can really focus on the sport. It's not enough to just attend practice. You got to make sure that the athletes are well looked after, and they have, if they're doing something on the side, if they're working part-time, or if they're studying, or if they're full-time athletes, that it's very important that every piece of that puzzle, it's optimal. And like a constant worry about money is not a good breeding ground for elite performance. And to mention, I don't know if he's on your list of coaches, but one person I like to highlight is my very good friend, Norwegian coach Leif Olav Alnes. I know we've been friends for more than 30 years, and for like most coaches, his career been up and down. He was very successful in the 90s coaching sprinters. One sprinter, Game Moen, that became European champion in the 200 meters. But his latest success is Karsten Warholm. If you would have said, 10 years ago that a Norwegian 400-meter hurdler would win the Olympic title and multiple world championships title and break the world record, with almost a second, people would have laughing, But he's always been amazing, with sometimes very limited resources. And, he's a biomechanics by education, but he's a jack of all trade. And he's someone that I really admire. He doesn't work with large groups, usually focus on, 2, 3, 4 athletes at the same time, but he's definitely the top of my list when it comes to a good coach, or for many, many reasons, not just for the success of some of his athletes.
Great. So how is it, like, how many hours did you dedicate for per week to prepare for training your athletes, or prepare for or to plan out those training plan? How many hours did you dedicate to these stuff per week?
Well, when I had the opportunity to coach some of my really top, sprinters, I think I must have been spending 25 to 30 hours a week. And out of those hours, there was maybe 20 hours at the track, and the rest was, planning, studying, evaluating, and so on, exchanging idea with other coaches and so on. So when I was working my hardest was when I was young coach. Now I'm 64, and I definitely have less time ahead as a coach than I have behind me. But it takes time, and it's very easy to cut corners. And if you talk to other coaches, you might ask about training programs, but you must ask why. Why you got to learn more. There's so many things that we can still develop in elite sports before we can say that the athletes are reaching the genetic potential. Sports, I feel, is still pretty undeveloped in many senses.
Does that include like sprinting? Because nowadays there's like,
I usually use a metaphor, that the Greeks, they had Olympic Games for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, they had professional athletes, professional coaches, and the Olympic Games was so important that they even put a halt on war, to run the games. In 1,000 years, I think by empirical evidence, you're going to find out what is the best practice for developing certain events. And we know that a stadium, 180 meters, I think it was one of the most prestigious events to win. So we don't know how fast they were, but I can assure that they were pretty damn fast after 1,000 years of experience. And professional sport at the moment, modern sport, in our civilization is maybe 50. If you come back in another, if you haven't destroyed the planet and destroyed everything, come back in 1,000 years and see what kind of performance that we're doing then. We think that the performance today is the ultimate, but I think there is much more room for improvement on all levels.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I'm gonna jump into the next topic about like training, like mock drill, that kind of stuff. I'm sure that coaches will enjoy the first part of our conversation and learn a lot from it. However, I'm going to just jump in the next topic. Is that okay?
Sure, sure.
So the first question would be like, how does like mock drills affect like our movement pattern in sprinting?
Well, if you talk about movement, regardless what kind of drills you are, it's pretty remote away from the actual event in many senses, But I do think, that certain drills can teach key position for young and novice athletes, but I don't think it's going to directly improve sprint mechanics of already elite. It can definitely serve as like a low amplitude plyometrics, some of the drills. And to a certain degree also is a part of the warm-up for every elite athlete. I don't think there's anyone in the world that doesn't do some kind of drills in the warm-up, But sometimes I feel, I can see people that they're sometimes better at drills than sprinting. They're mastering the drills, They look fantastic as long as they don't sprint, because they've been rehearsing, practicing drills, But if you look at so many aspects of movement, it's pretty remote from the actual event, not only by a velocity standard, but from a lot of other points.
So since it's kind of like different from the event, how exactly can we like train the coordination or like the motor control when it comes to like high speed running or sprinting?
Well, sprinting is more or less a brainstem activity. When a gun goes, there's no time to think what they're doing, And it's impossible to maintain, perfect motor control at 100% effort. And if you desire to alter mechanic in a positive sense, I think, running intensity between 92 to 96 or 90 to perhaps 97 or in that range is a better choice. If you compare to ballet dancers, they might practice 6 to 8 hours a day, And I think it's pretty vain to think you can improve mechanics by doing 3 times 30-meter fly 3 times a week at 100% effort. You might improve sprinting time for a short period of time, but I'm convinced that it's not the best practice when it comes to long-term development. But it can be very tempting for a young inexperienced coach dealing with young athletes to get quick results, but running very, very high velocity in training a couple of times a week, compete on the weekends. But from my experience, the ones that choose that route, they usually have premature speed plateaus that is later on being very, very difficult to break through. So I think we're more likely to success if we think about technique like in belly dancing, or gymnastics, do high volumes of semi 100% effort with larger volumes to teach sprint mechanics, because at 95% there's a lot of similarities when it comes to 100%. So sprinting, and you can do much greater volume, and hopefully you can teach your brain what is proper mechanics.
So how often do you go when you're training like sprinters? How often do you go to like 95% of max velocity?
Well, you always have to take into consideration, what athlete do you have in front of you, what are their training background, what is their level of performance. I mean, it's when you're young, usually your recovery is faster, your intensity is probably less. So maybe you can sprint, 2, maybe sometimes 3 times a week. But if you're world class or just under world class, and maybe a little more mature, the intensity is so high, so you need more recovery. So it would be very difficult to train above 95% or around 95%, 3 times a week with a senior, really fast athlete. Then you have to be more careful and maybe do intensities even at a lower intensity, so you don't stress the system too much. They usually the biggest obstacle we have are injuries, and it's usually that we overdose in terms of volume, and we overdose in terms of high volume and too much intensity. And if the athletes are not used to it, and injuries are bound to happen. So I like to see people maybe undertrain more than overtrain. Let it take a little longer, but try to stay as healthy as possible. But usually the biggest obstacle, and if you listen to any interview at the Olympics or the World Championships, they ask the winner why he won this time. He usually says, "Oh, this year I've been able to train injury-free." Or of course, always the exceptions, but I think that's the one thing that a lot of champions has in common, that they've been able to train without interruptions for a longer period of time. And I don't think those few freakish sessions at really, really high intensity is what matters. Is what the average session that really matters, and the average type of training for a long period of time.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the question about like training coordination and motor control. And you mentioned that we should be considering like athletes' long-term development. So besides like running at no matter it's like 95 or 92% of max velocity, is there like other like works or other like accessory works that you're gonna do on the gym or on the track?
Yeah, but if you assess an athlete and you think they have improper mechanics, it can be due to the fact they haven't been exposed to sprinting. So they can learn just by doing the trade. But sometimes it's a matter of strength deficit too. that maybe you have to improve the strength in the gym to improve your sprinting mechanics. But sometimes, you know, sometimes I think maybe that's more potent way of doing it. And not only the gym, can be plyometric, can be other things, you know, that might be more effective than sprinting drills to improve, you know, the sprinting mechanics, but more indirectly.
So, can you like give us some example about like the work you do?
Well, if you have an athlete that tend to collapse, you see that when they hit the ground, the ankle joint collapse, usually followed by the knee and the hip, everything collapses, you know, and you have a very great oscillation of center of mass, up and down, up and down. If you look at really good sprinters, you know, if you look at their head, there's more. They're running on a straight line. The oscillation is very, very low. And because they have great stiffness of the system can be improved by certain type of plyometrics. And also with maybe isometric training and even maximum strength training to some extent, you know. So I definitely feel that you can improve mechanics by no specific exercise as well, but I doubt a little bit that running drills are the best choices.
Cool. So there's another topic I think not a lot of like coaches or not a lot of like strength coaches are familiar with how the track world works. So I'm gonna ask is like if I'm gonna train like sprinters, how should I be preparing their core work or like core exercise for let them be able to like sprint faster?
I don't think you should give them a recipe of 1,000 sit-ups a day. That's number
Yeah.
one. But if you look at the trunk or the core, whatever you decide to call it, you know, it's a transfer of force from the lower body, you know, to the epicenter of mass, and it also provides an anchor point, you know, from which the limbs can produce movements and exert force. And but it's not a lot of movements, but it's a great deal of isometrics. But I also like to include some rotations, you know, and a weak core will likely result in poor sprinting mechanics. But most important, I find, when it comes to is proper posture in everything you do. So regardless if you're jogging, you're doing plyometrics or sprinting, that you have what we call an athletic posture, you know. So you're not a slouch, you know. If you understand what a slouch means, like you're running with, you know, very low positions, you know, running, you know, on the you know, planting the foot, you know, on the heels, and so I think you have to look proud. You have to look like an athlete when you train, and that's probably the you know, really good you know core training. But we also, if you think about, you know, some of the like the Olympic lifts or the derivatives of the Olympic lifts, you know, there's a lot of abdominal pressure developed in those lifts too, you know, especially if you have the bar above your head. If you do, you know, a snatch, or if you do a clean and jerk and so on, there's a lot of activity in the core. So you get a lot of core stability, you get a lot of core training. And I don't think a lot of Olympic weightlifters do a lot of, you know, sit-ups and so on, you know. They do primarily their events, and they have really, really strong core muscles.
So just like basically work on the things we did, just go back to the basic, like we do like squat, deadlift, or like Olympic lifting, and focus on the basic like sprinting. Their core are already strong enough.
Yeah, it's like anything, you know, that is how strong is strong enough? You got to look at the mechanics, and if you see some deficit there, I mean, maybe you have to go into the gym and do some adjustments. It's like everything, how strong is strong enough, how high do you have to jump, it's usually a diminishing return regardless. If you can squat, if you weigh 75 kilo and you can do a full squat at 150 kilos and you run 10, 20 in 100 meters, it's not necessary so that you can, if you squat 200, we run 10-0.
Yeah.
You probably have already reached a plateau, in terms of that type of exercise to transfer to sprinting. But that plateau is very, very different for different athletes, what type of athlete you are, Some athletes strive on they can really improve by getting stronger and stronger, and that plateau comes later, But for others, it comes very early. And some true champions in the world has barely done any squats. They can still run sub 10 seconds because, they're not necessarily strong in the gym, but they can produce a lot of force on the track. And that's a different story.
True. So, I'm gonna jump in the next one about like jumping, because there's also a lot of coaches discussing about the relationship between jumping higher and like running faster. So what are your thoughts on like the relationship between like jumping and sprinting?
Because I am a dinosaur, I can dig a little bit in historical fact, like Leif Olav Alnes and we did a biomechanical study on sprinters in 1994 in Oslo, where we recruited almost 30 male sprinters between very, 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 very low 10 seconds up to about 11. And we had them to run in the lab. They competed for $10,000, and we had them to sprint. We had them to jump with loads, and we had them to jump without loads. And at the time, another good friend of mine was late Carmelo Bosco, and done a lot of the pioneer work when it comes to stretch shortening cycle, and together with Paavo Komi and Jyväskylä, and he came up with a protocol, everyone heard of, like the squat jumps and the counter movement jumps and the rebound jumps and the drop on jumps, etc. And they show with some study on student primarily, as always, when it comes to studies, that they found correlation between the different jumps and sprint performance. Like a squat jump, the counter movement jump would correlate with the initial acceleration, and the rebound jump or the drop jump would correlate more with maximum velocity. So we did the test, and we had some people run really, really fast in the gym and they jump really, really high, but we found no correlation whatsoever. But then I started to think, at the time, Finland came with a group of sprinters, Finland are pretty decent at the moment, but at the time it's a low period, they didn't run so fast. But being Finnish sprinter, I think they were very influenced, by Bosco and all this work when it came to jumping. So they all jumped very, very high. They all were very, very strong, but they could not sprint. So we saw no correlation at all. But if we included those 6 to 8, Finnish sprinters, we saw pretty good correlation, within rebound jumping and maximum velocity and the initial acceleration and the counter movement and so on. So sometimes you fall into the trap of training for the test. So you focus your training so much on the test, but it really doesn't have any application to your event. We mustn't, one governing, rule is always the specific adaptation to impose demands. The SAI principle is very, very important. And there is so many boxes to tick off, when it comes to sprinting, and if you compare it to other exercises, you have to look at, recruitment of primary fast twitch fibers. You got to look at the intermuscular coordination, discharge rate of or working motor units. Is there a stretch shortening activity or not? You got to look at the, joint angles, force vectors, and magnitude of force, and the intermuscular correlation, contraction of and angular velocity of movements, and force production times. And if you look at anything that has to do with plyometrics, you can't tick those all off. Not all of them. What is specific? If you jump, you have great motor unit recruitment. You are rather, you can expect a lot of involvement of fast fibers. There is a high discharge rate, of course, of working motor units. There is a stretch shortening activity, even though it's shorter, it's longer than sprinting. There's definitely a stress on tendons. Joint angles can be specific to sprinters if you desire, some of them at least, at the stance phase and so on. The force vectors can also be rather sprinting specific. And the magnitude of force can be very specific, or usually exceeds the magnitude of forces involved with sprinting, double or triple. The disadvantages are, it's very technical demanding for some. It's not something that is easy to start with when you're 25. There's a high stress on bones and tendons, always a risk of injury. So you have to take it slowly and gradually build up, But the greatest advantage that I see that with plyometric training, that is, there is no hypertrophy usually involved. You don't put on an extra body mass, You become stronger, and if you have an overload, the magnitude of force is probably one thing to consider when you think about adaptation, and it definitely exceeds sprinting. And it combines rather well with development of motor skills, which heavy lifting doesn't do as well. If you do pairs of heavy lifting, it's very hard to combine with very, very, very high intensity sprinting. And it's developed general motor abilities. It's coordinative, So I think it's plyometrics is good, but it's not for everyone. You have to look at the athlete. You have to look at the athlete's background. You have to look at the vulnerability to injuries. But it's a good tool, but it's not everything.
So, all the times I'm looking at, there's a lot of video posted on no matter it's Instagram or YouTube. There's sprinter doing some hurdle job when they warm up, and there's different heights of the hurdle. So how do you have how to program the different height of the hurdle, and when it comes different height of the hurdle jump, what exactly does that train?
But sometimes just looking at the hurdle height doesn't tell the whole story. You got to look also on the hip flexion. It's like box jump. If you have very great hip flexions, you can jump on very high boxes without raising your center of gravity so much. It's the same for hurdle jumps too. So that's one aspect. Sometimes you can get jump over unnecessary high hurdles, and you would get the same effect for over a lower hurdle but with less flexion of the hip. Jumping from a high height is it's a lot of eccentric work involved, of course. You land more on the flat foot. Maybe you stress. If you talk about plantar flexors, maybe you stress more the soleus than the gastrocnemius. But usually the force production times are rather long. Maybe 250, 300 milliseconds if you jump over high hurdles. But you can see that maybe a way of developing strength as more toward the strength side. Then if you jump over very low hurdles, or you do what I think the Americans call the pogo jumps, they call them more the rebound jumps without hurdles. You work more on ankle stiffness. and much greater angles, both at the ankle and the knee and the hip, So this hurdle jumps can be done in many different ways, and you can also choose the different kind of surfaces. The harder the surface, usually the more resultant, the reaction forces from the ground you can be developed. So it's a lot more stress, but it's a lot more stress on the tendons and bones as well, and the injury risk really gets higher.
Great. So, if I want to train my athlete to jump higher, I know the answer would be it depends, or it's context dependent. But what are your thoughts on training athletes to jump higher?
Well, to jump higher, I think you have to jump. That's primary exercise, But sometimes if you deficit in strength, maybe you will improve your jumping capacity by improving your maximum strength. That's sometimes if you improve in strength, you see more improvement in jumping than you see the transfer to sprinting. That's at least my experience. You improve your squat and you improve your counter movement jump, and you shout hooray, hooray! But then you sprint and you see, oh, we are not any faster, but we jump higher. At least in these exercises. I think sometimes feel more correlation with the horizontal jumping than the vertical jump when it comes to sprinting. Some people, sprinters, they respond very well, to traditional bounding, speed bounding, and so on. The horizontal component is greater, and you develop maybe more power from the hip extensors that you can't do with the vertical jumping as much.
Cool. So last question before I let you go. Okay, I know I asked a lot of questions outside of the question. I'm sorry about that. But last question before I let you go. For sprinters, for 100-meter sprinters, they're probably gonna last elite of the elite. They're probably gonna run 9 point something or 10. So, how exactly do you maintain that high intensity, speed running, and how do you train the energy system of it?
Well, I think the short to long approach makes sense for a 100-meter sprinter, to develop an acceleration, capacity, strength association to acceleration, not only in the weight room, but heavy assisted, sprinting and so on. In the early, part of the training cycle, and towards the end, you go towards more and more speed endurance. You develop acceleration, top speed, and then speed endurance. But the other camps in the world that doesn't follow that at all. They use a more traditional way of producing, 100-meter sprinters as well, and they do a lot more sub-maximal intensity sprinting, and they try to avoid maximum velocity sprinting, because they're scared of injuries, But sometimes if you don't expose the athlete to high velocity training in training, and you're going to do that in competition, the muscle tissue might disagree, and you get injuries because you haven't been exposed before and you're not used to it, But I think that the short or long approach for a 100-meter sprinter makes sense. For a 200-meter sprinter, that has to do much more with elasticity, sprint endurance it might be a different story. But for the 60 and 100-meter guys, they usually, what my experience for what I've seen in the world, follow a short or long approach these days.
So, does that So short or long approach does that like how often do you like expose them to like the speed endurance for like let's say 100-meter sprinters?
Well, speed endurance doesn't play so much of a role, but still, I think that everyone benefits from little slower runs for many reasons, because it's for rhythm, for technique, for everything can't be high intensity all the time, and I think the faster you get, the more careful you have to be. And a microcycle of 7 days might not be ideal, to try to fit in 3 high-speed sessions in 7 days might be impossible. But you think about a microcycle in maybe 9 or 10 days, it's usually possible for any level. But I think with speed, the faster you get, you have to reduce the volume as well, because the stress is much higher on the system if you run 11.5 meters per second in training than if you're running 10 meters per second in training. It's a totally different ballpark. So.
Cool. Appreciate it, Coach. I really love it. And I learned a lot today. So
Thanks a lot, Eric. It's a pleasure and honor to be a part of your great product. You're a hard-working man, and you're a nice guy, and it's very hard to say no when you ask if you want to be, in part of your podcast. It's my pleasure, actually.
appreciate it, Coach. So if there's like coaches or therapists are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Well, a little bit. I'm on social media when it comes to Twitter. My Twitter account is Sprint Coach SWE. You can find me, or Instagram. It's Sprint Coach.
Yeah, appreciate it.